Alright. Continuing from last podcast, I wanted to start off talking about how philosophers talk about subjectivity versus objectivity, and they're usually referring to how to study, they say consciousness. I don't really like that term because nobody really knows what that means. I try to stick to words like experience. So there's like two schools of thought where explanation is bottom up and they're trying to reduce everything. So like there's the computational model of the mind where they think that experience and consciousness, whatever that means, is reducible to information processing, where there's like a neural code and stuff like that. And the opposite school is that consciousness or experience is an emergent property of the biology of the brain, so it's like not reducible to it. The problem with both those views is they don't address the relationship between the two. And I have the idea that experience is a symbol of brain states. So brain states are signifying experience. They're not causing them. They're not an emergent property of them. Words like processing and emergent property, these are made up terms. Not that they're bad. I don't mean that in a negative way, except that they don't refer to anything. They just kind of sound cool by association with how you ordinarily use those terms. Philosophers do that a lot, and scientists, which are philosophers. So you need a disposition to signification to explain the relationship between the two. And also you need non-experiential brain states and a non-experiential world to disambiguate experience. So to explain why there's this experience rather than that experience, without something to say, without criteria, essentially, to say why it's this way rather than some other, then it couldn't be anyway. So that's one way to look at the external world problem, that there needs to be something that's not part of experience to disambiguate experience, and there also has to be something that's outside of existence altogether, that's not experience or non-experience, to explain both of them and the relationship between the two. Okay, I think that's all I want to say about that for now. So the worldview I'm trying to present when I'm talking about mutual novelty in the previous podcast, existence, or what existence is eternal novelty. And you'll see on my link that I have a website called eternalnovelty.com, and there's a click on the eternal novelty part and you'll see this huge diagram, and it shows all the intervals of existence. So if I wanted to sort of like give you a general overview of what I mean by eternal novelty, think uniquely novel, linearly nested, hierarchically enfolded intervals of presence and absence within eternally unnovel intervals of yes and no. You can see how the concepts like complement each other, and that has to do with the mutual novelty of concepts, or the non-reductive, non-repetition of concepts. It's not leaving out any concepts. So essentially we have existence as a filling out the spectrum of possibilities or novel intervals, and then there's an eternal repetition, and there's an eternal repetition of like yes and no. So, and yes and no is defined by experience and not experience. So existence starts in progress with the first somatosensory experience, the most like primitive nervous systems, and so all the progress before that is symbolic. So that means means all the galaxies that formed before that and everything like that, from a homogeneous state. That's all symbolic progress, and that even complements normal progress. See, it's not using any concepts twice, and it's not leaving out any concepts. So, and then it ends with the lack of experience, when all the stars burn out, and then it just starts over. And it just keeps on doing it. It's always been doing it. And this conversation right here has happened an indefinite amount of times, and it's going to keep on happening. Okay. And so, all the concepts in this way of thinking about things are complementary. Like, 11 years ago, I started out seeing that there's these scales to existence, and they come in a pattern. You're not going to really understand what I mean, but it comes in a pattern of 3 of 2, of 3 of 2, of 3 of 2. And that actually complements dimension, how each scale has 3 coordinate systems, where it's 2 of 3, of 2 of 3, of 2 of 3. So the 2s are negative and positive, and then the 3 is the 3 uniquely perpendicular orientations, and that's actually the only truism. You can actually derive everything from that truism and non-reductive, non-repetition. Also, the bottom of it's hierarchically finite. There's a bottom to existence, and like I talked about in previous podcasts, that it's not anything at all. It's hollow at the bottom, and then the top is linearly infinite or indefinite, and it has to be, because it can't reduce anything. It can't reduce any possibilities, so it has to fill out the spectrum of all the different ways that superclusters can be arranged with filaments and voids. And then that, the infinity part, complements the hierarchically finite part. What else? The reason why I bring that up is because the last podcast I talked about regrounding the dollar, and I didn't mention, like, well, what are you going to ground it in? Well, worldview, and you have to sell the worldview, you have to make a company, and you have to make the academics have to, like, basically buy the curriculum. It provides a framework for academia. It redefines, like, all the divisions. It doesn't really touch, like, ordinary studies, like, because academia is not really concerned. Like, for example, I have a friend in the microbiology graduate program at UC Berkeley, and I tried to talk to him about, like, how the daily routine of the cell, for example, seems to have a disposition to functionality, and he wasn't even, like, disagreeing with me. He was just saying, like, I'm not even trained to think like that. I'm trained to extract what's useful from the cell to make some sort of drug, to make money for someone. And so academia is more concerned with money than understanding things and people maintaining their power. I don't want to really go onto that track so much. Another example of this non-reductive, non-repetition is the redshift thing that I talked about in the last podcast, where I think of the redshift as positional, because obviously it's indefinite. I mean, how could it be expanding in the first place? And so we got ordinary redshift, like in everyday life, like the sunset is reddened because it's moving away, and then the opposite, it's blue shifted because it's moving towards. And even the galaxy's motions within a cluster would be redshifted and blue shifted, but those are just perturbations to a positional redshift. And the idea is that it has to be different because it can't be the same. It can't be repetitive. Non-reductive and non-repetitive, it doesn't use the same concept twice, basically. That's what I'm saying. So that's how that fits together. What else? I talked about regrounding the dollar in this worldview. The reason why I say that is that I've spent like 5 years like studying everything online, like all different movement, like the Zeitgeist movement, and they want to do away with money and then you got like the opposite individualism extreme, like anarcho-capitalism, and Stefan Molyneux is like the archetype, and then Peter Joseph is the archetype on the other side, collectivism versus individualism. The problem is that they're extremes, and they think that they can change each other, but they can't. You can see that their debate online kind of illustrates that, and the only time they would agree is like to be against the banks. They both hate the banks, so everyone hates each other, but they're really just all dispositions in opposition. And anyone that's going to try to be against the banking elite, they're not going to get anywhere. The only 2 presidents that actually tried to get rid of the banking influence on the United States were Lincoln and Kennedy, and look what happened. I've even heard that the vice president that became president, I don't know his name, when the same day that Kennedy was assassinated, he, on Air Force One, rescinded all the $20 bills that Kennedy had already started to put in circulation, where he's going to try to get rid of the Federal Reserve. So instead of trying to get rid of the Fed, work with them to reground the dollar in this worldview, and then out of that you can get a subsidized rent program out of that, which make life a lot easier for everyone. There's something else about that I wanted to mention. Well, I'll just keep on moving. Also, last podcast I was talking about there being no bottom to existence, like it's hollow, and even anti-realist physicists will waffle at that idea once they realize the implications of that. It means that the symbols have to be explained by something that's not part of existence, and that's really an issue for people. They're just baffled by that idea, even though any other idea is circular reasoning. If you try to make an explanation within existence, it's just circular anyway. Okay. God, I forgot what I was trying to say. Oh. So Peter Joseph and Stefan Molyneux, they both think that they can change the banks into hippies or something. Or Peter Joseph thinks that he can change the banks into hippies because he thinks it's just all conditioning. So there's this faulty worldview. They think that there's no disposition to symbolic power or consolidation of power. It's not real. And I'm saying that it's not going away. So you have to work within it, and we should work within it. Because all the dispositions are supposed to be expressed, and you have to find a way to fit them all together like a jigsaw puzzle to make a system that works for everyone, where they maintain their power, but not at the expense of everyone starving and being homeless. And if any antagonism, like, you're just gonna reach stalemate, like, and lives are just gonna be ruined, like they're being ruined now. Okay. What else? The problem that I've faced is that it seems that nobody actually is motivated to do anything. Anyone that's motivated to do anything, say like Peter Joseph and all his followers, are too idealistic. And then you got like the festival crowd, and they talk about love and everything like that, but they don't want to do anything. They think that that's sufficient. Like, if you just keep on talking about love, then somehow spontaneously the bankers are going to turn into hippies, or the baby boomers. People think there's this awakening happening, but then you look at your parents and they're happy watching Dancing with the Stars. So, and everyone's just talking about their 401k and things move on, and we've destroyed 2 parts of the Earth in like 5 years. The whole Pacific Ocean is irradiated. It's still from Fukushima. It's all radiation's coming over. Trash and everything is just dumped right into the ocean. The United States Navy just probably dumps all their... I'm getting this from my friend that was in the Iraq War. They said that they just dumped their trash into the ocean, and people are allowed to dump a certain amount of waste in the ocean. What else? And, you know, the Gulf spill, like, nobody's really accountable for that, really. Lives are ruined. I also talked about in the last podcast how all change is teleportation, but I didn't really elaborate on that. Like when you're touching something, there's still a gap, and at the bottom, we're talking about things that only exist symbolically in the first place. So all change is teleportation. So talking about teleportation is almost taking for granted, like, ordinary causation itself is teleportation, and that should be fascinating to people, because you need a disposition to bridge that gap, just like you need a disposition to explain the symbols at the bottom of existence that we see in the molecular arrays. What else? Okay, so I want to talk about sort of like the illusions of each generation. The baby boomers are still under the illusion that they actually changed something. Back in the 60s, they may have changed the fashion. They talked about love a lot, kind of like Generation Y does, the festival crowd. But ultimately, they commodified it, turned it into money. And money is God. Everyone talks about religion, but no one really... I don't think anybody really cares. It's not really a metaphysical problem for people. Like, it's really like a social gathering. And even then, people care about money more than they care about any of that stuff. So, and there's just this article that came out talking about how religious people aren't really more giving in any way than atheists or anything. So, it's really, God has been dead for a really long time, like Nietzsche talked about, but what he didn't anticipate that money would replace it, or I mean, I work in a gas station, and all people care about is lottery. Get more money so they can buy a TV, so they can watch more TV, watch more Dancing with the Stars. Meanwhile, they're like, half the world is starving, and people think that there's this sense of humanity, but I don't see it. Like, maybe it once existed. I don't think so. I think we get this impression from movies. Like, I saw the Interstellar trailer, or you watch Armageddon, and you get this sense of we're saving humanity, but everyone's pretty much out for themselves. So I don't think that we should really be using that term, unless we can somehow find a way to make everything work for everyone. I think that term is obsolete. I mean, I don't even think that civilization should continue to exist if, like, half the world is starving, living in poverty, and nobody's having any fun, and everyone hates each other, constantly in conflict over things that I don't even care about. What else? I think that's all I really want to talk about right now. Yeah, I think I'm going to end it there. Thanks for watching.